This phrase is everywhere on the internet these days. There are no good foods or bad foods, it's all just food. And in the next few minutes, I'll not only prove to you that this is blatantly wrong, I'll even share my very own ranking of foods from nasty to great. And especially if you're new to my channel, you'll probably be surprised by some of my choices, based on science, of course. Plus, I'll also share with you the real secret to how you may never feel guilty or ashamed of eating any food ever again. No matter where on the ranking that food belongs. No guilt, no shame. Now, before we look at the ranking of foods, it is very important that you do not take this personally. Some people take the phrase or label good food or bad food personally, though in reality it has nothing to do with you as a person. The words good and bad describe the food themselves, not you. While more specifically, they describe whether the food is good for you or bad for you, whether they add to your health or subtract from it. Meaning, a food can be bad for your health, though that does not mean you are a bad person for eating it. The whole point of calling certain foods good or bad is to help you. Still, some people feel bad for eating foods that are bad for them. They may feel like they made a bad choice for eating that food. They may even feel guilty or ashamed. The solution to that isn't to just pretend that the food isn't actually bad for you. The real solution is something very different, and I'll share it with you later in this video. So, some people don't want any food to be called good or bad. Though, if you don't know what foods are good for you and what foods are bad for you, how can you make the best choice of what to eat? Some people will say that instead of saying that some foods are better than others, some foods are just more nutritious. So there are no bad foods, though some foods are just less nutritious than others. Sounds good. Though, then I'll ask you, what do you call a food that is found to increase oxidized LDL cholesterol, which is found to be a better predictor of heart disease? You've probably heard of LDL cholesterol, which is referred to as bad cholesterol. Well, when LDL cholesterol is oxidized, it may be a much better predictor of heart disease. If a food can do that to you, would you still not consider it bad for your health? Actually, a large study from back in the day found that when people included that type of food in their diet in place of saturated fat, more people died. So obviously I'm not talking about saturated fat here. I'm actually talking about the type of fat we're usually told to eat as part of a heart-healthy diet, namely vegetable oils full of linoleic acid. Ironic, right? How a so-called heart-healthy food may be one of the contributors to heart disease. So once again, if a food can do that to you, wouldn't you want to know about it so that you can at least limit the amount that you eat of that food? Because it's not like some people would say that it's just less nutritious. It may actually cause harm to you. Subtract from your health. If there are no good foods or bad foods, why would you choose butter instead of soybean oil? Why would you choose olive oil over sunflower oil? Why would you care about what type of fat they used in the ready-made meal that you bought? Or what additives they used? Why would you care to prepare your own meal if you could just buy some cheap stuff from the takeout place around the corner that apparently is just as good for you? I mean, if there are no good foods or bad foods, why does it matter if I eat this or this? By the way, let me just say welcome back to my channel. In case you don't know me, I'm Ingunn, a Norwegian Viking living in Portugal. I have a true passion for nutrition science, and I use my background in physics and mathematics to dive deep into the science with a critical mind. Because a lot of what we hear today is either blatantly wrong or far from optimal. And you'll see one of the reasons that is very shortly. So subscribe to my channel for a bit of a different and, let's say, raw perspective on nutrition and weight loss. Now let's look at a different food, Cheerios. Now, some of you will think right away that this belongs in the bad category of foods. Though actually, Tufts University published a paper where they had created a ranking of foods from least to most healthy. And do you know where they placed Cheerios? At the very top, meaning that it is one of the healthiest foods on planet Earth, according to this ranking. Now, I know what you may be thinking, that this is obviously a joke, right? Yeah, I thought so too, but it's not. Of course, I wouldn't base my ranking on what Tufts University says. Why? Well, let's just take a look at where they place a few other foods on their ranking. Take soybean meal, for example, or textured vegetable protein. According to them, these are as healthy as foods can get. They get a 100 out of a 100 score. These are powders often used as main ingredients in fake meat or meat substitutes. Actually, they even place these substitutes higher up on the ranking than the real foods themselves. Makes no sense, does it? Even this fine aged cheese has the same ranking or same score as fast food milkshake. Animal foods in general are further down on this ranking, which, if you look at the nutrition value of animal foods, makes no sense because animal foods are some of the most nutritious foods on this planet, objectively speaking. Actually, according to these papers, one of the main reasons humans have such large brains is because our ancestors back in the day started relying more and more on animal foods. It made it possible for their brains to triple in size. So it really makes you wonder how they came up with this ranking, doesn't it? Well, it's easy to understand once you take a look at this long list of competing interests of the authors. It includes companies that are in the grain industry, the fake meat or animal substitute industry, in the plant-based milk industry, and more. Now you can understand why they put soybean meal as the healthiest food, or all the plant-based milk, fake egg, meat substitutes, oils, etc. Why they are higher on the list, while some of the actual real nutritious, real foods are further down on the list. It's obviously not for your health, it's for their wealth. In my ranking, good actually means it's nutritious and it comes from real food. Mostly easy to digest so that you can actually absorb most of the nutrients, and that they are not high in chemicals that may damage your gut lining, etc. For more on why that last part is very important, check out this video, which I will link to below as well as at the end of this video. Now, you may think that this Tufts ranking is just one ranking that you may disregard and that's it. Don't note that it's not just that ranking where the authors have massive conflicts of interest. For example, when it comes to the dietary guidelines for Americans, as this paper confirms, 95% of committee members had conflict of interest with the food and/or pharmaceutical industries, and that particular actors, including Kellogg, Abbott, Kraft, Mead Johnson, General Mills, Danone, and the International Life Sciences, had connections with multiple members. So really, you cannot trust that these guidelines are made solely to help you be as healthy as possible. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up, shared with a friend, comment below, and for lots more tips, follow me on Instagram at VikingIngunn. Now, there are a few foods left that I want to include in this ranking, some that I think you'll be quite surprised to see where I place them. Well, at least it's not where these other mainstream rankings would place them, though then again, we've seen how they are not to be trusted anyway, right? First though, a lot of people would just tell you to just eat a variety of foods. That's it. As long as you do that, you're good to go. Though what does that even mean? I mean, for some people, this would be considered eating a variety of foods. For others, this would be considered eating a variety of foods, and so on. Obviously, there's no one right diet, though if there are no good foods and bad foods, how do you know what kind of variety to eat for the sake of your health? Again, I'm assuming that you actually care about your health. If not, then obviously it doesn't really matter what you eat and you can just disregard this whole video. Though if you do care about your health, you're probably going to want to know what types of foods are good for you, right? So that you can focus your diet around those foods. And you're probably going to want to know what foods are bad for your health, right? So that you can at least limit those foods. This just makes sense, doesn't it? Now, I get it. Some people feel really bad after eating pizza or chocolate or chips or fries, etc. And I get it. Especially if you overindulge on these foods, you can feel terrible afterwards. And that can be quite damaging mentally. So someone came up with this brilliant idea to tell everyone that you don't need to feel bad because there's no such thing as bad foods. If the food isn't actually bad for you, there's no reason for you to feel bad for eating it, right? Problem solved. There's just one small detail, and that is that closing your eyes to how the food you eat affects your body doesn't change how the food you eat affects your body. Just saying, just putting that out there. I know that might not be what you want to hear, though the food you eat doesn't care about your feelings. However, listen, I totally get it. I've been there myself as well. I know how terrible it can feel. About 8 to 9 years ago, I used to go totally bananas on the weekends. Used to eat everything and anything. From eating brownies for lunch to enjoying so much candy and chips and drinks at night, to the point where I really felt like my belly could pop at any moment. So I told myself I would never do that again, until the next weekend arrived and it happened again. I've also had periods in my life where I would just go to the supermarket, buy a huge bag of chips and a huge bar of chocolate and just start munching down and eat as much as possible, while feeling sad and sorry and as if I was failing myself and that I lost control and that all was lost. That was back then, however. And I now know the secret to not feeling terrible no matter what I eat. No matter if I eat chips or fries or chocolate or whatever. I know the secret to not feeling bad about it and not letting it get out of control. And it does not include ignoring how the food I eat affects my body. And it also does not include telling myself that I should never eat bad foods. There are 3 parts to this. All of them are important, though you really do not want to miss the third one. Again, this is the secret to how to not feel guilty or bad for eating any food in 3 parts. Number 1, the dose makes the poison. Don't use this as an excuse to eat a ton of crap, because even if you don't end up in the hospital from eating one bad meal, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect your health, even if you don't notice it at first. Because some of the food that you eat today actually becomes part of your body. For example, some of the fat that you eat actually becomes part of the walls of your cells, or your cholesterol, like we talked about earlier, or the inner structure of your mitochondria, which is where you produce the energy that you need to stay alive, to breathe, to keep your heart beating, to keeping your immune system strong, and for you to have the energy that you need to accomplish all the things that you want to do throughout the day. So even though one meal won't make it or break it when it comes to your health, it still counts. While at the same time, we need to consider the other factors of our life. Our social life, for example. I wouldn't leave my friend's dinner table even if I found out that she had cooked the food with sunflower oil. We also need to consider what type of lifestyle we want. How flexible do we want to be? What's really important to us? You never actually know what will happen tomorrow anyway. Some people spend a great majority of their life working their ass off, not really having a life at all, just so that they can have a wonderful retirement, and then end up injured or with all sorts of health issues, or maybe not even making it that far anyway. Of course, I'm not saying that you should completely forget about the future, because you don't even know if there will be a tomorrow, though there can be a middle ground. Plus, we need to consider our mental health as well. For some people, it's really necessary to let loose for the sake of their mental health. If we are too strict, we may either go nuts or give in and feel terrible afterwards. So really, you need to find your balance. And it really is true that the dose makes the poison. It's what you do most of the time that matters most. Now, the second part is where our feelings come into play when it comes to this. So here's part 2. You only feel bad if what you're doing does not align with your values. Listen, no matter what you do, there will always be people that disagree with how you live your life. Always. Even if you eat only healthy foods and take great care of your body, there will be people who think you're too strict. They will see it as if you're always dieting and that you're not really living your life to the fullest. If you let loose a little bit, there will be some people who think you're careless about your health. If you eat this healthy food, there will be people who think that it's the wrong kind of healthy food. If you eat this kind of food to indulge a little bit, there will be people who judge you for it. There will always be people who disagree with how you live your life. And that's fine. That's life. It won't change, ever. What's important is that you decide how you want to live your life. You decide what values are important to you. If your values depend on the acceptance and praise of other people, you're in trouble. Because like we just talked about, there will always be people who disagree with what you're doing. So really, you need to decide. You need to decide how important your health is to you. Is it a priority in your life? How much of a priority? There's no right or wrong answer here. You decide what's important to you. And that can change with time as well. Nothing is set in stone. Though when you know what's important to you and when you know your values, then you can act on them. And you only really feel bad if your actions don't align with your values. As long as you keep other people's opinions out of your feelings, so to speak. You can, of course, take their opinions into account. You can consider their opinions, though they don't need to affect how you feel. Though also note that there's nothing wrong with feeling bad sometimes. That's part of our feedback loop in life. That's how we correct course. We're basically just noticing that our actions don't align with our values, so we need to pay closer attention. Either we need to adjust our actions, or we need to reevaluate what's truly important to us, our values. That's it. Now, part 3 is especially important. What foods you eat has a huge impact on your cravings. This has been one of the most important things for me personally. And there are several factors that play a role here. If you eat very little during the week, you'll feel deprived, hungry, and be way more likely to crave foods that you actually don't really want to eat because they don't fit with your values. Or you may be more likely to eat a lot more of them than you actually wanted to. What specifically you eat also matters. For example, protein is one of the main factors that control our satiety and how much we eat. If we don't include enough protein in our diet, we may naturally eat more altogether. Though make sure you get the great majority of your protein from real food sources, not protein powders or protein bars or fake meat. Some foods may also increase hunger. For example, since we were talking about linoleic acid earlier, linoleic acid has been found to even increase the hunger hormone ghrelin. Plus, if you cut out carbs from your diet, you may increase cravings. And if you haven't watched my video on They Lied About Carbs, I highly suggest you do. I'll link to it below and also at the end of this video. So all these 3 parts are important if you want to not feel bad for eating whatever foods you're eating. Instead of pretending that there are no bad foods, so that's why you shouldn't feel bad for eating them, make sure you know what foods are bad for you so that you can at least limit them, maybe without needing to avoid them altogether. Make sure you know what's important to you, know your values so that you can align your actions with them, and pay attention to your diet in general because it makes all the difference when it comes to your cravings. Okay, let's quickly look at a few more foods to add to our ranking. Some of the foods we're told are the healthiest for us, like for example broccoli, are really not that great. I mean, I'd say it's more or less neutral. Because contrary to what we're told, they're not really that nutritious. They may contain a lot of nutrients, though a lot of them are not actually absorbed by our body. Some of these foods may even contain anti-nutrients that may make our meals less nutritious in general because they block our body from absorbing certain nutrients. So there you have it, my ranking of 20 foods from nasty to great. Now remember what we talked about in this video. The more you know about how the different foods you eat affect your body, the better. Saying that there are no good foods or bad foods is total BS. And ignoring how the food you eat affects your body does not change how the food you eat affects your body. And unless you know what foods add to your health and what foods may subtract from your health, how do you know what foods to choose in order or for the sake of your health? Remember, this is not personal. This is to help you. The choices you make are up to you. And all that really matters is that the choices that you make align with your values. There's no right or wrong here. It's all up to you. There are ways to make those choices easier for you, though no matter the choices that you make, how you feel about those choices is up to you. Though I at least prefer to make my choices with my eyes wide open, because that's when I'm in control of my life. If you want to know more about how different foods can affect your body, including your metabolism, and even how you can make weight loss easier, then make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And if you'd like a step-by-step approach on how to lose weight based on science, explained in a simple way and with personal support, make sure you check out my 90-day weight loss program called Slim by Science at slimbyscience.com. You'll find the link in the description of this video. Again, I would really appreciate if you gave this video a thumbs up. Here are 2 videos you want to check out next. Enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.